The hegemony of rational species had maintained peace for 47,000 years through the most powerful weapon ever devised. Bureaucracy so tedious it made the heat death of the universe seem thrilling by comparison. You see, when every territorial dispute requires filing Form 847J in triplicate, translated into 600 languages, including three that consist entirely of metabolic fluctuations, most species decide their planets aren't worth the paperwork. It was genius, really. Boring, soul-crushing genius. Which brings us to Tuesday, Galactic Standard Time, when the Vorthan Empire decided to break this proud tradition of conflict avoidance. And why, you might ask, would an advanced civilization with mastery over dark matter and a cultural history spanning 60 millennia throw away everything for war? One human woman and her dress. Ambassador Crex Theta of the Vorthan Empire arrived at Station Omega-7 with a kind of confidence that comes from having 16 eyes and the ability to see in dimensions humans can't pronounce. The station itself was a marvel of compromise. Gravity that satisfied no one, atmosphere that made everyone slightly lightheaded, and cafeteria food that violated at least 12 Geneva Conventions, despite being technically vegetarian. The humans have gone too far, Crexithata announced to his delegation, his chitinous form trembling with what passed for rage among his people. The Vorthans had lodged their formal complaint through proper channels, of course. Forms had been filed. Subcommittees had been formed. Someone, somewhere, had probably even read page 1 of their grievance. The conference room had been meticulously prepared according to the Galactic Diplomatic Protocols, revised edition 2847. Neutral colors, if you ignored the fact that the Zephyrians saw beige as ultraviolet, temperature set to the mean of all attending species preferences, which meant everyone was equally uncomfortable. Even the water had been pH balanced to offend no one, achieving a level of blandness that would make distilled water jealous. Then she walked in. Veronica Blackwood, Earth's chief negotiator, entered the room like a supernova in stilettos. The dress was red, not just any red. This was the kind of red that made stop signs jealous, that made Mars file a copyright claim, that made human blood cells feel inadequate. It hugged curves that defied several of the more conservative interpretations of physics and featured a slit that went high enough to make even the furniture blush. The Vorthan delegation's reaction was immediate and visceral. 16 eyes multiplied by 12 delegates equals 192 organs of vision, all dilating in perfect synchronization. 2 delegates fell off their chairs, impressive, considering Vorthan chairs were essentially biomechanical symbiotes. Ambassador Crex Theta's external respiratory sacs inflated to maximum capacity, a display typically reserved for natural disasters or tax audits. "Is there a problem?" Veronica asked, settling into her chair with the casual grace of someone who just detonated a cultural atom bomb and was checking her nails for chips. That, Crex Theta's translator glitched, cycling through languages as it tried to find words that wouldn't cause a diplomatic incident. It finally settled on, "Your external covering is the color of the unmentionable horror." Now here's something the Galactic Diplomatic Corps' cultural sensitivity training had somehow missed, probably because it was buried in Appendix Q of Volume 47. To the Vorthans, the color red wasn't just taboo. It was the visual equivalent of someone playing death metal at a meditation retreat while juggling live grenades and reciting your browser history to your grandmother. Their entire evolutionary history had been shaped by avoiding red things. On their homeworld, everything red was either poisonous, explosive, or worse, politically opinionated. Their greatest cultural villain, whose name roughly translates to "he who shall not be perceived," was depicted entirely in shades of red. Their most traumatic historical event, the great optical disaster of Cycle 1847, involved a red dwarf star that had the audacity to exist in their visual range. "Oh, this old thing?" Veronica smoothed down her dress, somehow making it catch the light in new and horrifying ways. "I got it on sale, 40% off. Can you believe it?" The Vorthans, in fact, could not believe it. Their species had developed complex economic models, predictive algorithms that could forecast market trends across galactic clusters, and yet the concept of purchasing something that caused spontaneous neural hemorrhaging just because it was discounted broke their understanding of rational behavior. How exactly had Veronica Blackwood become Earth's chief negotiator? Well, that's a story that would make even the most jaded xenobiologist question the concept of intelligent life. It started, as many of humanity's greatest decisions do, with alcohol and a dare. 3 months earlier, at the Galactic Diplomatic Corps annual mixer, an event about as enjoyable as it sounds, someone had made the mistake of mentioning that humans couldn't handle Rigellian brandy. Veronica, who'd been perfectly content representing Earth's interests in the minor trade disputes division, took this as a personal challenge. 17 shots later, she'd not only remained conscious, but had successfully negotiated a trade agreement with the Crystalline Collective while doing a handstand. The diplomatic AI that assigned positions, clearly suffering from what could only be described as a digital stroke, interpreted her performance as unconventional but effective, and promptly promoted her to chief negotiator for Earth. The fact that she'd also won an arm wrestling contest with a being that technically didn't have arms was listed as additional qualifications. Back in the conference room, the situation was deteriorating faster than uranium in a microwave. The formal dinner, meant to ease tensions through the universal language of awkward, small talk, and questionable catering, had become ground zero for an intergalactic incident. Veronica, blissfully unaware, or perhaps willfully ignorant of the chaos she was causing, had decided the room was too warm. Her solution? Remove her jacket, revealing that the red dress also featured what could generously be called strategic cutouts, and what the Vorthans would later describe in their war declaration as geometric arrangements designed for maximum optical assault. "You know," she said, reaching for what the humans had assured everyone was just sparkling water but smelled suspiciously like champagne. "I don't understand why everyone's so tense. We're all friends here, right?" 3 Vorthan delegates fainted. Not the dignified sliding gracefully to the floor kind of faint, but the full theatrical production, external respiratory sacs deflating with a sound like disappointed bagpipes, all 16 eyes rolling back in a hypnotic spiral pattern that would have made a decent screensaver if it weren't so disturbing. Perhaps Ambassador Crexis managed through what his species considered gritted teeth, but looked more like aggressively clicking mandibles. The human delegate could consider a more diplomatically neutral attire. Neutral? Veronica laughed, a sound that somehow made the dress shimmer. "Honey, I don't do neutral. Besides, red is a power color. Read it in a magazine. Very professional." The concept of fashion magazines as sources of diplomatic guidance caused several universal translators to emit small puffs of smoke. Then came what historians would later call the twirl incident, though the Vorthans had a much longer name for it that roughly translated to the moment when the universe revealed its fundamental cruelty through centrifugal force and fabric. Someone, and 17 different species would later claim it wasn't them, mentioned that the dress looked different under the station's artificial lighting. Veronica, with the enthusiasm of someone showing off a new purchase, stood up and gave a little spin. The dress, obeying laws of physics that seemed specifically designed for maximum dramatic effect, flared out. The overhead lights caught every fold, every swish of fabric, creating what could only be described as a red disco ball effect. The Vorthan military attaché later reported that it was like staring into the event horizon of a collapsing star, if that star was also judging your life choices. Ambassador Crex Theta, summoning every ounce of diplomatic training from his 3 centuries of service, stood on all 6 legs. His voice, when it came, had the gravity of someone announcing the heat death of the universe. "The Vorthan Empire formally requests that the human delegate change her attire, or we will be forced to consider this an act of optical warfare." Veronica looked down at her dress, then back at the ambassador. She smiled, the kind of smile that had probably gotten humanity kicked out of several garden worlds. Or what,